Happy holidays to all. It is that time of year again. It is time for the annual Advent of Code. If you've never been part of the Advent of Code, it is a yearly tradition where every day leading up to Christmas, we solve coding puzzles and challenges in our favorite programming languages to a yearly Christmas theme and story. It's a good time. Highly encourage you to participate if you're even interested remotely in programming, no matter your skill level. So this year I'm going to be coding in Python, and I'm going to be posting my Advent adventure every day of the month. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with day one. Something is wrong with the global snow production, and we've been selected to take a look. The elves have given us a map, and on it they have used stars to mark the top 50 locations that are likely to be having problems. You've been doing this long enough to know to restore snow operations, we'll need to check all 50 stars by December 25th. We will collect stars by solving coding puzzles. 2 puzzles will be made available on each day of the Advent calendar. The second puzzle is unlocked when you complete the first one. Each puzzle will grant you 1 star. So as they are explaining this, you try to ask, why can't you just use a weather machine?
Not powerful enough.
And where are they even sending you?
The sky. Where else?
And why your map looks mostly blank?
You sure ask a lot of questions.
And hang on, did you just say the sky?
Of course. Where do you think snow comes from?
As you're asking these questions, you realize that the elves have already loaded you into a Trebuchet.
Best way to launch 90 kilograms of Christmas cheer over 300 holly jolly meters, making it the perfect form of travel this holiday season. Now hold still. We need to strap you in.
As they're making their final adjustments, they discover that their calibration document, your puzzle input, has been amended by a very young elf who apparently is just excited to show off their art skills. Consequently, the elves are having trouble reading the values on this amended document.
I think this is a 7, right? Nah, 8 for sure.
And this is where our first challenge comes into play. The newly improved calibration document consists of lines of text. Each line originally contained a specific calibration value that the elves now have to recover. On each line, the calibration value can be found by combining the first digit and the last digit, in that order, to form a single 2-digit number. So let's go ahead and dig into the example they gave to us. So this is an example of a calibration document. You can see here we got each line. Each one of these is going to represent a number, and you can see these are the extracted numbers down here. So for this first one, the first character is a 1, last character is a 2. So obviously this number is going to be 12. For this one, there's only 2 numbers, a 3, which comes first, and an 8, and that's going to be extracted to 38. So basically we just need to take each line of text, ignore all the letters, just extract the numbers, then take the first number and the last number and put them together to make a 2-digit number. Now, it's important to note this last one here. This one's actually pretty interesting. This one has only a 7, so a single digit, but it still combines into a 77. So no matter how many numbers we extract, it still needs to add up to a 2-digit number. So based on this document, I'm going to assume that each line is going to have at least 1 number, but that's not necessarily a safe assumption. We'll have to check whether or not that's actually valid once we get into the actual input. And speaking of the actual input, this is our input for the actual puzzle itself. So this is going to be pretty straightforward. All we have to do is take this input here and probably take this example just for good measure and write something to extract those numbers for us. So let's go ahead and jump into the code. Okay, so I went ahead and created a few files here. I have the code input. This is the document that the puzzle actually gave us that has all of those lines and the numbers that we're going to need to extract from them, just as a simple variable that I can import. I've also got the example that I'm going to be using to test my solution before we try it on the larger input. And we also have the answer here, which is 142, which was given to us back in the puzzle description. And finally, I have the puzzle 1 solution. Now, obviously, whenever we unlock puzzle 2, we're going to have to add another file down here, probably change up these 2 files here, but we'll worry about that when we get into it. And the only thing I've done here is went ahead and imported all those variables I made in these 2 other modules, just to try and keep things clean, because this input is very long. I don't want to be looking at this while I'm trying to solve the puzzle. All right, so let's first define a function that will actually process the actual input. So we're going to do def, we'll just call it process input, and we'll just have code input here. Okay, so we know that code input is going to be a string, so let's go ahead and just define that as a string, and this is going to return, let's just say an int. We're just going to assume it's going to be a whole number. It should be a whole number. I don't see why it shouldn't be. And let's go ahead and split this code into lines. So we're going to do lines is equal to code input dot split, and we're going to split on new line characters. There we go. So that's going to split our code here into the individual lines just so we can process them individually. And we're going to need a sum, which is 0, and then we're going to need to process each line. So for line in lines, and then we'll do the processing here to extract the number and then add it to the sum. And when it's all said and done, we're going to return the sum. So right now this is just going to return 0, but that's what we want. So let's go ahead, test it out, just make sure it's working. And we're going to start off with a sample. There we go. And so now we got a nice little debug statement that's going to tell us whether or not we actually solved the puzzle correctly. So this should return false. And there we go. So we got our calibration value that we calculated, which is 0 because we're not doing anything with the inputs yet. Got the actual value, and we got the result, which is a failure. Now, to actually get those numbers out of the text input, we can actually use regular expressions. That's probably the easiest way to do it, even though I haven't used regular expressions in a long time and was never really good at them. I think I remember enough to get this solved. So let's go ahead and do numbers only. We're going to say RD sub. So anything that matches this regular expression is going to be replaced. In this case, we're just going to replace it with a blank string, and we're going to pass in our line. So what's going to happen here is it's going to try and apply this regular expression, which we're about to type. If it matches anything, it's going to replace it with an empty string character, and we're going to process on the line and get a new string back, which should just be numbers only. Now, let's go ahead and type in the regular expression, which is just the negation of any digits, and that's a symbol for digits in regular expressions. And that should work. So now we need to extract the first and the last one and combine them into one digit. That should be pretty straightforward. So let's do for our line. That's kind of a long title, but oh well. So we want the first one, which is going to be indexed at 0, and we want the last one, which in Python we can just do -1 to get the last one in the list. And now we want to add this to the sum, so we're going to do sum plus equal. We need to cast this to an int, calibration value for line. Now, we're going to be brave here, and we're going to assume that this works, and we're not going to do any error checking. That's probably a bad idea, but let's just go with it, see what happens. There it is. And I see what I did. I mistyped the character. I did a / and needed to be a /, or vice versa. I always get them mixed up. This should work. There we go. So as you can see here, once we actually fixed the regular expression and typed it in correctly, we got the correct numbers. Hooray for us. So let's actually try on the real calibration value. So we're going to do real calibration value, process the input, and we're going to do our code input here. And we're going to print that out. So let's see what our actual calibration value should be. So it should be 54,990. So let's go ahead and go back to Advent of Code and plug this value in. Okay, moment of truth. Did we get the correct answer? We got it! That is 1 gold star. We are that much closer to establishing the worldwide snow production. So let's go ahead and continue on to part 2. That's what you want to see, the very first line of part 2. That's what you want to see, the very first line of part 2. Your calibration calculation isn't quite correct. It looks like some of the digits are actually spelled out with letters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 also count as valid digits. Equipped with this new information, we now need to find the real first and last digit for each line. For example, and it gave some examples down here. So obviously we're going to have to adjust our code a little bit to account for the fact that some are actually spelled out with letters. That's kind of annoying. All right, so let's go ahead and get this new sample over into our code and set up for part 2. The good news is that we don't have to change our code input from the first one because it is the same as part 1. So that's nice. Okay, so we're all set up here. We just duplicated the code from puzzle 1 to puzzle 2, plugged in our new samples, and now we're ready to now we're ready to go. So I think if we adjust this to include the actual spelled out words, that this should work. Maybe. Let me try some stuff here. Alright, so after thinking about this for a little bit, I realized that this approach actually isn't going to work. 1, I don't think this regular expression is actually working properly. 2, even if we did filter out any of the letters that aren't spelled out digits, we still don't have a good way to convert them. So I think what we're going to have to do is, instead of a re-substitution, we can do a re-find all. So we can change the regular expression to say find any instances of these characters or a digit, and then include those in a list. So rather than trying to swap the characters in place in the original list, we just extract them into a new list and process from there. I think that's going to be a little bit easier than what I'm doing here. So let me go ahead and code up some stuff here. So first off, we're going to need a list of the digits that we're going to actually need to extract. This feels wrong. I probably shouldn't be typing all these out by hand. It feels very inefficient, but oh well. Do we need to include 0? It doesn't say. I'm going to go ahead and include 0. Just in case. I actually just noticed something else here too. So while looking at this, I actually noticed something else that I'm going to point out. There's a 16 here. Now, we could take this to mean that we need to convert this into a 1/6, but the actual description of the problem doesn't actually say that. It says that these instances here count as valid digits. It doesn't say anything about teens counting or 20s counting or anything like that. So as written, I'm going to assume that if it isn't on this list, it technically doesn't need to be included. So we don't have to worry about teens or 20s or anything like that. Just if we see a 6, that's going to count as a 6, and we're going to end it there. If we don't get the right calibration value, we're going to have to go back and revisit that assumption. But just as written, I think that's what they're going for. We're going to see. If it's wrong, we know that the assumption is incorrect. Okay, so we have a list written out here. So now we actually need to map what digits those actually map to, just to make it a little bit easier on ourselves. We're also going to map the actual string digits, so the string of 9, to the actual number 9 as well. Okay, so what I got here is a digit mapping dictionary. So anytime we input one of these into it, it is going to give us the number representation. So if we input 9 into it, it's going to give us the string of 9. And also it's going to do it for the regular digits as well. So if we put in a 9, it's also going to give us a 9. So this way we can have one regular expression that's going to match any of these words or a digit. It can get passed through the same mapping, and we know that whenever we pass it through the mapping, it's going to give us an actual number. Okay, so that's all the prep work out of the way. Time to actually put together the regular expression. Oh joy. I am desperately trying to remember what I can about regular expressions as I'm typing this. I have a horrible feeling that this is going to be incorrect. We shall see. Okay, so if this works as I expect it to, this expression should map any substring that matches a spelled out digit or an actual digit, based on this update of the mapping down here. Whenever we find a matching expression in re-find all, it is going to return that as a separate item. We're going to pass that item through our digit mapping, so it's going to convert the actual spelled out letters to their number counterparts and just keep the number counterparts the same. And that should give us a list of items that is just the numbers extracted from the original text. We can then do the same process we did before, take the first and the last, and then convert that to a number and add it to our sum. This should, in theory, work. I hope. I really hope I got this regular expression right. Okay, so this is a good sign. So we got the correct calibration value for the sample problem, and we have a value for our actual calibration. We didn't run into any errors. We're all good there. So let's go ahead and try and plug this into Advent code. We did it! Oh, thank God. Whew! Okay, so we got the gold star for part 2. So that's going to conclude day 1. We now have the proper calibration values, and we can launch the trebuchet with us inside of it. Wait a minute.